Hello there, glad you made it. Tonight, we're traveling to a time of thick air and thicker silence, to the year 1665, a time when the streets were quiet, not because they wanted to be, but because they had to be. Let the noise of the present slip away, dim the lights, settle into the warmth of your blanket, and let your breath become the only sound that matters. Slower now. You're not here anymore, not in this year, not in this body. Tonight you wear layers of wool and leather. You carry a pouch of herbs at your hip and a beaked mask over your face. You are the doctor who walks where no one else dares. The streets are empty, the bells have long stopped ringing, and the city has learned how to whisper. Behind every door, someone is waiting or gone. But tonight, none of them call for you. Tonight is for watching, for walking, for remembering how to breathe when the world holds its breath. This is not a story of panic, not anymore. This is a story of silence, of shadow, and of the strange comfort found in routine, even at the end of everything. If this helps you sleep, feel free to subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. And before you drift too far, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's oddly calming to know how far this quiet reaches. Now, let the plague city settle around you. Let the breath slow. Let the mask slip over your face, and we'll begin. The walls of your quarters do not keep out the cold. They were not built to comfort or impress. They were built to last, to stand while everything else crumbles. And still, the wind pushes through the cracks between the stones, curling along the floor like a forgotten spirit. You've come to accept it, just as you've accepted everything else. The wind, the scent of vinegar soaked into the beams, the silence broken only by the occasional cough from somewhere deeper in the building. All of it has become part of your ritual. The room is small, 4 steps across, 5 steps long. At the center stands a wooden table, rough and uneven, scarred by the weight of glass jars, rolled cloth, and the occasional tremble of your hand. The surface smells of dried herbs and boiled leather. Nothing fresh, nothing living. A copper bowl sits at one corner, darkened from use, filled half an inch with lukewarm water that's already clouded from the last time you washed your hands. The water's purpose is not to clean anymore. It is there for the gesture. You wash not to remove dirt, but to remember that you still can. Your gloves hang like ghosts from a peg beside the door, the fingers bent inwards, stiff from the vinegar soak earlier that morning. You remember holding them over the fire to dry, careful not to let the heat crack the leather. Every day you do this. You've tried counting how many times, how many mornings you've sat in that same chair, holding the gloves like something sacred, something that still deserves your care. But you always lose count. The days blend, the hours slide past each other like oil. All you know is that the gloves must be ready. Your mask rests on a cloth near the window. The long beak points slightly downward, as if ashamed. You replaced the herbs inside it yesterday. Rosemary, dried orange peel, crushed juniper. You wanted to add cloves, but you're running low. The scent is faint now, muted by weeks of sweat and breath and whatever else lingers inside. You don't clean it the way you used to. Not because you've stopped caring, but because even your care has become measured, economical, exact. There is only so much energy left at the end of each day, and it is not endless. You sit at the edge of the bed, if it can be called that. The frame creaks beneath you. The mattress is stuffed with straw, flattened by months of sleep without rest. The wool blanket lies folded at your feet. You haven't used it in days. The nights are not cold enough to justify it, and the heaviness of fabric against your chest feels more suffocating than comforting now. You leave it there, untouched. a symbol of comfort, not comfort itself. Somewhere outside a door slams, or perhaps a shutter. You don't rise to check. You know better than to waste energy chasing every sound. This city groans and mutters like an old man in his sleep, sometimes angry, sometimes grieving, always restless. You listen, not for danger, but for rhythm. You've learned the city's breathing. You know when something is different. Tonight, everything feels the same, which, strangely, is what worries you. You rise and cross to the table. The mask waits. You lift it by the straps, slowly, carefully, as though it could break. You've worn it so many times that the leather has molded to the shape of your face. You no longer flinch at the smell. You no longer pause before slipping it on. You don't even look at yourself anymore. There are no mirrors here. You run a finger along the beak. A faint crack has formed along the side. Not enough to worry about not yet. You'll patch it tomorrow or the day after. If you remember, the candle flickers beside you. The flame dances in the draft that seeps under the door. You watch it move. It reminds you of breath, of life, of something still capable of change. You lower yourself onto the cot again, this time lying back fully, arms at your sides. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the dark lines where the beams meet the stone. You used to count the knots in the wood, used to make shapes out of them, animals, faces, stories. You haven't done that in weeks. Not since the numbers started climbing, not since the coughing grew louder, not since the streets stopped echoing with footsteps. Above you, the rafters creak, wind again, or something more. You don't look. You've stopped reacting to sounds unless they're human. The rats do not frighten you. The wind cannot harm you. Only people can. You close your eyes. The mask is still in your hand. You set it on your chest like a shield. It feels heavy, heavier than it should. Not in weight, but in memory. You remember your first visit, the child in the corner, the mother who wouldn't stop whispering, the window nailed shut, the flies. You try not to think about that night, but it always finds its way back. The candle burns lower, the room dims. The shadows grow longer, softer. You begin to breathe with the room, slowly, rhythmically, not with effort, just with presence. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. The room responds with stillness. Outside, the bell tolls once, then nothing. The silence that follows feels too complete, too deliberate, and yet you remain still. Because stillness, you've learned, is the only thing you can control. You rise before the sun, not because sleep has ended, but because it never really began. Your cot is nothing more than a wooden plank covered with rough cloth, the straw inside flattened and stiff from use. It smells faintly of vinegar and old sweat, though everything smells like vinegar these days. You sit up slowly, spine creaking, every joint sending up its small complaint. You do not wince. You do not sigh. You simply move. The fire in the hearth has long since gone out. A cold draft snakes under the door and touches your bare ankles. You reach for your socks, wool uneven, full of holes, and pull them on, one after the other, stretching the fabric until it gives. Your boots follow, cracked leather stiff at the heel, stained near the toes with things you've stopped naming. They slide on with resistance. You tug at the laces with methodical fingers. The mask waits on the windowsill. As always, the morning light hasn't reached it yet, but you can see its shape outlined against the faintest pink hue in the sky. A long beak. 2 black glass circles for eyes. It resembles a bird in omen, a messenger. You don't like looking at it, you don't like what it means, but you reach for it anyway. Always. Inside the beak, the herbs have faded. You used to take time with them, dried lavender, sage, rose petals, cloves. Now there's barely anything left, a crumpled bit of mint, the rind of a spoiled orange. You press them into place, not because they help, but because they are part of the ritual. And rituals are the only defense you have left. The mask goes on with a familiar weight. The leather is cracked, worn smooth in some places from weeks of use. You tie the straps tightly, pulling until they bite into your scalp. The glass over your eyes fogs momentarily from your breath, then clears. Your world narrows to the tunnel vision of the beak, black around the edges, a permanent shadow. You reach for your coat next, heavy wool, lined with oiled fabric. It's meant to keep disease out, but the truth is you still feel the cold. You still feel the wet. You just pretend otherwise. Your gloves, thick, uneven, stained, go unlashed. They used to be white. Now, dressed in the uniform of fear and false hope, you rise. Your room is barely wider than the bed. A small table, a single candle, a bowl with water gone stale. On the wall, a parchment and old drawing of a human body, covered in circles and lines, pointing to organs and illnesses. You drew it once, early in your training, back when you still believed in anatomy, over humors. You never took it down. Even now, it mocks you with its clean lines and unfulfilled promise. You step into the hallway. It's still dark. No torches lit. Your footsteps are muffled on the stone. The air is thick with silence, but not the kind that feels safe. It's the silence of breath held too long, the kind that cracks at the edges. You pass the other rooms. Most are empty. One used to belong to another doctor. He stopped coming back 3 weeks ago. You never asked where he went. You never asked anyone anything anymore. At the end of the hall, a small window lets in the first breath of light. You pause there, as you always do, to look out at the courtyard. It's stone and mud, scattered with broken tools and an overturned bucket. In the corner, a cart waits, covered in a tarp. The horse isn't there yet. It comes later, pulled by the same driver who says nothing, who never removes his hood. You don't ask his name. You walk down the steps into the courtyard. It rained overnight. You feel the mud beneath your boots. It sticks slightly, enough to remind you that the ground here never truly dries anymore. The fog hasn't lifted. It coils in low pockets, curling around the corners of buildings, swallowing sound. You hear faint coughing from somewhere beyond the wall. You don't flinch. You move to the cart. Set down your satchel inside the instruments of comfort. A worn cloth, a pouch of dried mint leaves, a small bottle of oil, and a piece of beeswax. Tools not to heal, but to soften the departure. The driver arrives. No words, just a nod. He hands you a folded paper, today's names, locations, ages. You scan them without reading. You've stopped imagining the faces that go with them. You mount the cart, the wood creaks, the horse begins to move. You travel through a city that's half asleep, half afraid. The shutters are all closed. The street is damp. The smell of rot lives in the gutters. Once this street was loud with children and merchants, with laughter and argument. Now it holds only whispers. Footsteps are rare, and when they come, they pass quickly. With heads low, you pass the apothecary empty shelves behind smudged glass. You pass the church, its bell missing since last month. You pass the bakery. You used to stop there, for warmth, for bread. It's closed now. You still look in the window. A habit, a superstition. The first patient is near the docks. An old man, you're told. Widowed. Alone. He sent for you with a bloodied cloth tied to his door. The signal. You know the place. You've been there before. The cart slows. You dismount. The street is slick beneath your boots. You walk the final few steps alone. You don't knock. You simply enter. Because in this city, the doctor never waits for permission. Only silence. You close the door behind you, gently, but it still groans like it's in pain. Inside, the light is dim and sour, filtering through warped shutters that haven't been opened in days. The air sits heavy, laced with vinegar, sweat, and the strange, coppery ghost of blood. You can hear the breath before you see the man. Thin, wet, scraping at his throat like he's swallowing gravel. He lies in the far corner, barely more than a shape wrapped in threadbare blankets, sunk deep into a straw mattress that smells of mold and time. He isn't asleep, just far enough gone that waking has become optional. You take slow steps across the room, boots crunching faintly on bits of cracked plaster. Every surface feels coated in a layer of stillness. Untouched bowls on a low table, a half-burnt candle, wilted herbs strung uselessly above the hearth. No one's been here but him for days, maybe longer. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't need to. You're not the first figure to darken his doorway in a beaked mask and black robe. You might be the last, though. You kneel beside him without a word. He flinches slightly at the shift in air, and when he speaks, it's like the words were sitting on his tongue, waiting for someone to hear them. You're not the same one. The voice is raw, cracked. You shake your head once. He died? He asks. You nod. He nods too, but his is more like an understanding between strangers who've accepted they won't be saved. Figures, he mutters, and his eyes drift toward the window, but don't reach it. You open your satchel and remove a cloth soaked in vinegar, dabbing it gently on his forehead. He flinches again, then relaxes. His eyes close halfway. He smells the vinegar. You wear it to keep the death out? He asks. You don't answer. Not because you don't have one, but because there's no point pretending anymore. The plague doesn't care what you wear. It finds the lungs. It waits in linens. It hides in hands you forgot to wash. All the herbs in the world can't keep it out when it decides it wants in. On the far wall is another cot, small, neat, too neat. A child's. You can tell by the size. It's untouched. Maybe deliberately. Maybe reverently. The man sees you glance at it. He speaks again, slower this time. She left 3 nights ago. My granddaughter. Had a face like her mother, and courage like her father. Didn't want to go. Said she'd stay with me. I lied and told her I'd be fine. He coughs once, sharply, and then sighs. Told her to run south, toward the olive groves. Said I'd meet her there when I was better. His hand twitches under the blanket, gripping something unseen. I won't, and she knows it. You take his pulse faint, irregular. His hands are cold. You press the cloth to his wrist. You want to say something, but this isn't the kind of man who needs comfort. He's already made peace with the silence. He doesn't fear the end, just the waiting. He speaks again, barely louder than the wind beyond the walls. She used to hum when she made stew, off-key, said it helped the broth thicken. I hated that sound when I was younger. Now I'd give anything to hear it. You nod slowly. He turns his head toward you, eyes wet but unblinking. You don't say much, he whispers. That's good. We've heard enough words lately, haven't we? Priests, healers, criers in the street. They talk like they know. He breathes. You just watch. That's better. A gust of wind rattles the shutters. Dust drifts from the ceiling beams. The room breathes with him, shallow and halting. You adjust his blanket, fold the edges tighter against his chest. His hand finds yours. It doesn't grip, just rests there. Like weight. Like memory. You sit there longer than you probably should. The longer you stay, the less alone he is. And that's why you came. Not to heal, not to stop the rot in his lungs, but to bear witness. When he finally sleeps, his breath barely audible, you gather your satchel, place a folded cloth over his eyes to shield them from the morning, and rise without a sound. The street outside is no brighter. The world feels paused, but you walk forward anyway. There's more work to be done, and no one left to do it but you. The next house isn't marked with chalk or a cross, but that means little these days. People die too fast for neighbors to keep up, and the sick are often too weak to send word. You push the door open. No resistance, no lock, no sounds of fear or surprise, just the thick, syrupy air of sickness, humid and fermented. This house is smaller than the last. The walls are bare. The fire has long since gone out, and the only light comes from the orange hue of the evening sun bleeding through a tattered curtain. The kitchen table is set for 3, though only one remains seated. A woman, middle-aged perhaps, sits stiffly in a chair near the cold hearth. Her hair is matted to her scalp, lips cracked, skin glossy with sweat. Her hands are folded neatly in her lap. You would mistake her for dead if not for the slight rise and fall of her chest. She does not acknowledge you immediately. You approach slowly, remove one glove, and press the back of your hand to her forehead. She's burning up, but not in a way that will end quickly. This is the kind of fever that simmers low and cruel. A long goodbye. I told him not to go, she says without turning her head. Her voice is thin, shredded at the edges like parchment soaked in rain. He said he'd find the old healer. Said she still lived near the orchard. But there is no orchard. Not anymore. She looks at you then, or perhaps through you. He took our last good blanket, the blue one with the stitched stars. Said she'd need something to carry the herbs back in. You nod slowly, letting her words hang like mist between you. Her eyes drift to the floor where a boy lies curled on a thin wool rug. His ribs show even beneath his tunic. His arms are wrapped around his stomach like he's trying to hold something in. You kneel beside him. A shallow breath, another. His pulse flutters like the wings of a dying moth. You press a cloth, soaked in vinegar and water, against his forehead. He shifts, barely. His eyes open for half a second, glance at your mask, then drift closed again. The woman coughs, a sound that scrapes the inside of her chest. She leans back slightly, resting her head against the chimney stone. He has my husband's eyes, she says, big and stupid, trusting. He asked me if the rats would go away when he got better. I didn't have an answer. Her breathing is uneven now, more silence between inhales than sound. You gently adjust her position, tucking a flat cushion behind her neck. She winces not from pain, but from effort. There's bread, she mutters, in the cupboard. It's old, but it won't complain if you take it. You don't answer. You stay beside her. Not because you can help, but because she asked. In the end, presence is all that remains of healing. You look around. The walls are covered in soot. A bowl on the table has dried herbs in it, lavender, thyme, and what looks like chalk dust. Folk medicine, the only kind still available. You know it does nothing, but sometimes doing nothing is all people have. And that, too, has meaning. The boy stirs again. This time he moans soft, distant, like a dream calling out from inside him. The woman doesn't move. She's listening, but she's far away now. Her eyes have lost their focus. Her hands slip apart, fall to her sides like wilted leaves. You remain still. There is nothing left to say. After a time, you place your satchel beside the hearth and remove a small piece of cloth. You wrap a few of the dried herbs inside ritual, not remedy, and place them gently in the woman's lap. Then you rise, pull the blanket higher over the boy's legs, and turn toward the door. As you step out into the street, the sky is already darkening. The lamps are being lit one by one, tiny flames flickering in the windless air. The sound of weeping echoes faintly from somewhere nearby, and you make a note of the next house to visit. You cannot save them. That's not what you're here to do. You're here to witness, to stand between the dying and the dead, to offer dignity to the final hours. You walk slowly, your boots sinking slightly into the dirt of the road. The weight of the mask is heavier now, not from wear, but from the accumulation of every gaze, every whisper, every soft cough and final sigh. You stop at a corner and take a moment to breathe. The edge of the river is not far. You can hear it, a soft current brushing over stone. It's where the washerwomen used to gather before they began to vanish one by one. Now it is quiet. Even the water is tired. A cat slips past your feet, thin and sharp-eyed. It pauses, glances at you, then continues on without concern. Animals always know when not to linger. Across the square, you hear the distant sound of bells, church bells. Not for prayer, but for notice. Another cart has come, another collection. You do not look. You already know what it carries. You've seen it too many times. You adjust your mask. Not because it needs fixing, but because you need something to do with your hands. A small human motion in a night where the human feels too far away. And then you step forward into the dark again, because there is always one more house, always one more room where someone waits to not be alone when it ends. The mask comes first. You keep it hanging above your cot, suspended from a single iron hook in the beam overhead. It stares down at you like a patient guardian. Hollow eyes, long beak, the stiff leather curved and cracked from weeks of wear. You rise and reach for it as you always do, with both hands, gently, reverently. You don't put it on yet, not until the ritual is complete. You begin by washing your hands in the basin by the window. The water is cold, drawn at idlan and left to sit in its copper bowl. You dip your fingers in slowly, then rub them together with a bar of lye soap until the skin feels raw. The soap is scented with lavender, not for luxury, for defense. You breathe it in, a superstition perhaps, but one that brings you calm. After the wash, you light the herbs. The mixture changes weekly. Rose petals, thyme, mint, wormwood if you can find it, but always with one constant, dried orange peel. You crush it under your thumb, drop it into the shallow dish near the window, and strike a match. Smoke rises gently, curling in the cold light, winding toward the ceiling. This scent, too, is part of the armor. Believed to purify the air, to ward off bad humors, to balance what must not be seen. Your gloves are next. Stiff leather, dark brown, stitched with care by the cobbler across the alley. You pull them on one finger at a time, wincing as one of your knuckles cracks. The leather is tight today. Perhaps it's the damp. Perhaps it's the fatigue. Now the coat. Thick, black wool, heavy, lined with linen. It reaches nearly to your ankles and makes your shoulders ache just looking at it. You slip it over your arms and feel its weight settle like memory. You tie the cords at the neck. Button the brass down your chest. Fasten the belt. Your breath slows again. This is your carapace, your shell. Without it, you are simply another man. And then finally the mask. You lower it onto your face. The straps pull against your head. The eye lenses fog briefly from your breath, but the vision clears. The world changes from within the beak. Sounds dull, smells distort. The scent of the herbs packed into the nasal chamber roses and vinegar and garlic overwhelms all else. You are no longer yourself now. You are the doctor, the figure they fear, respect, or pray to. You are meant to walk untouched through the plague. You tie the final strap. Straighten your back. You are ready. Below, the bell tolls. Not the church bell, that's silent now. This is the bell of the death cart. The one that passes by your door at midday, pausing only when needed. You hear footsteps on the stairs, not your own. A voice, familiar. It's Thomas, the boy from 3 doors down. His voice is thin and panicked. "Doctor, please. It's my sister. She's not waking up." You reach for your bag. The mask creaks slightly as you move. The coat resists bending, but you descend the stairs anyway, each step slow and deliberate, your shadow long against the stone wall. You never ask if it's too late. You only ask where she lies, because questions of time, mercy, or hope, those come later. For now, you simply walk, and the mask breathes for you. You follow Thomas through the alleyways, boots sinking slightly into the muck of last night's rain, past boarded windows and doorways marked with white chalk crosses. The silence of the city is different now. It no longer feels like a pause. It feels like a burial. It's not the silence of sleep or reverence, but of withdrawal. The air carries the smell of wet stone, damp wood, and the bitter tinge of human sweat left too long to stew in fear. Your mask filters most of it, but not all. Never all. Thomas stops at a narrow door. The wood is split near the base where rats have gnawed a hole big enough to crawl through. You hesitate. Not because you're afraid of the plague, you're long past that, but because you know what this door will open to. You've seen the script before. You could recite it with your eyes closed. Still, you raise a gloved hand and knock gently, as if that would somehow soften what follows. The woman opens the door with a kind of expression that no longer includes surprise or hope. Her eyes are red not from weeping, but from exhaustion, like the color has bled into them from too many sleepless nights. She says nothing, only steps aside. You duck your head and step inside. Their home is a single room. One fire, barely alive, whispers in the hearth. Smoke curls lazily against soot-black walls. Herbs hang from the rafters, brown and curled from age. Not charm necessity. Nothing here is for decoration. A child's shoes sit neatly near the door, their soles worn to nothing. A bowl of untouched broth rests on a table in the corner, already gathering a film on top. And on the bed, a straw mattress, threadbare and low to the floor, lies the girl, Agnes. She is smaller than you expected. Her limbs are thin, her hands folded over her belly in an unconscious plea for comfort. Her lips are slightly parted. The breath comes and goes, shallow and unsteady. You kneel beside her, your knees protesting the movement. The mask creaks as you bend forward. You lift the mirror from your pouch and hold it to her lips. It fogs, not much, but enough. You take out the vial of vinegar, pour a small amount into a clay bowl, and dip a cloth into it. You press it gently to her forehead, wiping away the sweat that clings to her skin like a second layer. Her brow twitches slightly. You whisper her name, not loudly, but clearly. Agnes. Her eyelids flutter. For a moment, there's something there. A flicker of presence. The mother speaks finally. Her voice is like paper, dry and crumpling. It started with a cough, then a fever, then nothing. She swallows hard. I've been giving her water, broth. She won't eat. She won't wake. You nod. Not because it helps, but because it's something. You don't offer comfort, not yet. Instead, you work. Slowly, methodically. You mix a tonic in her presence. A few drops of valerian, honey to soothe the bitterness, a touch of poppy. You show the mother every step, not because she asked, but because people fear what they don't understand. And right now, they fear everything. Even you. You coax a spoonful into Agnes's mouth. Most of it goes down. A few drops escape, running along the corner of her lip. You catch them with the cloth. The mother leans forward and strokes the girl's hair. She used to sing, she says, almost to herself. She sang to the goats. They hated it, but she did it anyway. You don't respond. There's nothing you can say that wouldn't sound like pity. And they've had enough of that. You stay longer than usual. You clean her hands. You adjust her pillow. You remove the soiled blanket and replace it with a clean one from your pack. The mother watches, hands folded, mouth trembling. When you finish, you rise slowly. Every joint protests, but you ignore it. You always do. At the door, Thomas is waiting. You step outside, and the woman follows. She doesn't say thank you. She says, will she? But doesn't finish. You nod. You don't promise. You don't lie. You only nod. And then you leave. Back at your quarters, you sit in the chair by the basin, your mask still hanging around your neck. The room smells of lavender oil and vinegar-soaked linens. You stare at your reflection in the water rippling uncertain. You remember Annez's face, the small breath she took, the twitch of her eyelid when you said her name, and you allow yourself, for the first time in a while, to hope. Not loudly, not with conviction, but with a whisper, because maybe, just maybe, Agnes will still be breathing tomorrow. The city has learned how to whisper. Even in daylight, the streets no longer call out in their usual chorus of wheel clatter and haggling. The rhythm has slowed. Life moves in murmurs and sideways glances. You and Thomas walk together now like shadows drawn along the walls. Neither of you speaks. Words in the morning are a kind of violence too sharp for a world trying to keep its breath shallow and unnoticed. The fog hangs lower today. The mist clings to the wooden beams like cobwebs spun from ash and sleep. Your mask filters the air, though it does little to filter the weight of it all. The scent of soaked timber, faint decay, boiled herbs, everything you smell now carries the memory of rot. A black line has been painted hastily across the doorframe ahead. Another mark. You've stopped counting them. You no longer think about how many people you've visited or how many homes you've walked into. Each one feels like a collapsed lung. Each one holds its own version of waiting. This house has no door, only a thick cloth, damp and drooping, drawn across the entrance like a curtain pulled between this life and whatever waits behind it. You pull it aside slowly. The interior greets you with stillness, not silence. There's a difference. Silence is absence. Stillness is presence, but held too tightly. Inside, paper has been glued to the window slats with milk and flour. Sunlight presses against the makeshift shutters like a child's breath on glass. The air smells wrong, sour sweat, clove, and something wet, like mildew hiding under floorboards. You hear the voice before you see her, a woman singing. Not words, just sound, a wavering thread of tone, like someone pulling a needle slowly through cloth. The source of the sound is a woman hunched in a corner. She rocks gently, wrapped in too many layers for spring. Her eyes are dull, but her song is steady. It is not for you. You cross the room. Each step on the wooden floor sounds like an echo in a church you've never believed in. A form lies on the ground beneath a worn woolen sheet, not moving. You don't need to lift it, but you do. Gently, the face beneath is gray-blue, jaw clenched as if the last breath had tried to bargain. His lips are chapped. Dried flecks of time are still tucked into the corners of his eyes, a crude herbal offering from someone who hoped it might help. His hands are curled into fists. You see that his fingernails are stained. Under the blanket, his feet are bare. One heel is wrapped in old linen, half unraveled. You don't ask her name. She offers it anyway, Miriam. Her voice doesn't shake. She tells you he was a baker. that they hadn't had flour in 6 days, that he used to hum while kneading dough. She doesn't cry, she just speaks. Her voice is flat, like a plank held too long in water. She says she tied string around his feet when he started seizing. She says she whispered his name through the night. She says she's glad he didn't see what came next. There are more details than you want to carry, but you listen anyway. That's the work now, listening without interrupting, offering presence without solution. You remove a pouch from your satchel and place it on the floor near her. Dried roots, crushed chamomile, a little charcoal and wax paper. Not medicine, just something to hold. She doesn't touch it. You don't blame her. Thomas lingers in the doorway. He keeps his head low, as he always does when there is grief he cannot name. Before you leave, Miriam asks you for a favor. Not a prayer, not a cure. She asks you to sit with her until nightfall. You do. For an hour or more, no one moves. The body on the floor becomes a part of the room, like furniture too worn to be removed. When it grows cold, she wraps herself tighter and stares at the window. You realize the singing hasn't stopped. It has simply gone inside her, like a heartbeat turned inwards. When you finally step out, you leave the door uncovered. There is no longer any reason to pretend that privacy matters. Thomas doesn't speak. He hands you the chalk. You draw the mark slowly, deliberately, on the outer wall. It joins the others, just another silent scream in white powder and cracked brick. The fog hasn't lifted. You begin walking again. The next house waits. The fire is barely more than a flicker now, a dull orange pulse against the soot-black walls of the apothecary's back chamber. You've stopped counting how many nights you've ended here, peeling back your gloves like a second skin, your fingers pale and wrinkled from the dampness trapped inside. The table still smells of vinegar, sweat, and something faintly metallic, maybe the copper basins, maybe the old blood on your sleeve you didn't wash off properly. It's impossible to tell anymore. Thomas is seated across from you, slouched in a way that betrays the heavy weight of his thoughts. He hasn't spoken since you returned from the home of the fevered boy that morning. It had been a quiet visit. No screaming, no fighting, just a mother too tired to cry, and a father who didn't meet your eyes. The boy had been cold already. No plague marks, just gone. You'd left a sachet of herbs by the door, more out of habit than belief. Thomas held the door for you when you left, as if still hoping you might find something to cure. Now, in this flickering half-light, you both sit in silence. Not companionable, just silent. The mask still hangs around your neck, the beak casting a shadow on the table. You watch the flame reflected in its glass eyes, distorted, grotesque, almost familiar. Then a knock. Sharp, intentional. One knock. You both freeze. No one knocks anymore. Not unless they know exactly who you are and what it means to summon you. Thomas stands slowly, body stiff, like he's unwrapping a memory he doesn't want to unfold. He opens the door without asking. A man enters, middle-aged, hair matted, cloak damp from the fog. He doesn't speak right away, doesn't need to. You see it in the way he holds himself and the way his eyes skip over you both, not from fear, but from anticipation of what must come next. He says his daughter has taken a turn, says he doesn't want her to go alone, says nothing about payment. He doesn't even ask you to come. He tells you, and you nod, because what else is there to do? The streets outside are muted. Not empty, nothing is truly empty here, but dulled, like someone has drawn a wet cloth over the city. The sounds of mourning, praying, coughing, whispering, they blend into the mist. The man's house is small, nestled between two shuttered wine shops. You've passed it before, maybe even been inside once, but you don't say anything. He leads you to the back room, then retreats without a word. She's young, younger than you expected. 9, maybe 10. She lies on a mat that has clearly been remade several times, its frayed edges tied with bits of twine. Her hair is long, dark, swept behind her ears as if someone tried to neaten her before you arrived. Her hands are folded, fingers clasped around a dried flower, blue petals, crushed but not broken. You've seen death in all its forms, violent, agonizing, slow. But this is different. This is practiced. Someone loved her, enough to try and make her look whole. You kneel beside her, knees clicking against the wooden slats of the floor. There's no pulse to check, no breath to count. But you stay there. You listen anyway. Thomas lights a single taper and places it on a low shelf. The flame doesn't flicker, not even when the window groans under the weight of wind. The room feels suspended, not between life and death, but somewhere after both, a strange middle place that isn't supposed to exist but somehow does. There's a drawing beside her bed, crude, made with crushed berries or old ink. A sun with eyes, a dog, maybe her, maybe her father. She wrote a name in the corner, uneven and sprawling, Elise, the same name her father had said outside. You reach into your satchel and pull out one of the coins you keep for this exact moment. It's bent, tarnished, barely worth its weight. You slip it beneath the mat, an old Roman habit, a way to pay the ferryman. Most don't remember why it's done, but you do. You stay longer than you should. There's nothing more you can do. But you wait anyway. Back at the apothecary, you boil more linen. The scent of burning rosemary fills the room. Thomas doesn't speak, but you know what he's thinking. You're thinking it, too. There are too many rooms like that one. Too many girls with braids and crushed blue petals. You wonder how many have slipped through your fingers in the past week alone. It's easier not to count. Later that night, you try to sleep. You lie on your cot, mask hung like a ghost above your head, gloves drying by the fire. The city hums softly around you, its grief muffled by fog and distance. You close your eyes, but in the quiet you don't hear nothing. You hear Elise, and behind your eyelids, the flame on the shelf still doesn't flicker. The knock on the door comes too early, or too late. You're never quite sure anymore. Time isn't something you track with bells and sundials these days. It's measured in symptoms. How long since the rash appeared? How many hours before the coughing turned wet? How quickly the bruises moved from the chest to the limbs? When the knock comes, you're still half-dressed, shirt damp from the night's fever dreams, gloves crusted at the fingertips from yesterday's herbal paste. Outside the door is a man with a hat too fine for someone knocking on your door in this part of the city. He says he has a letter. His hands don't shake. His teeth are clean. He smells like saffron. You hate that you noticed that last part. It means your nose is still working, which means you're not sick. Not yet. The letter is sealed in wax-deep red, pressed with a sigil you don't recognize. You already know it's not good news. No one sends good news in a wax seal. Inside, the script is hurried but careful, the kind of writing someone rehearses before sending a message they hope you'll take seriously. It's from a merchant guild, or what's left of one. They're requesting you, not your help, your presence, for a containment review. It's not a cure they want. It's control. You don't ask for more details. You already know. There's been an outbreak at the docks. The cargo was untouched, they'll say. The crew showed no signs. But you've heard this before, every time. Silk from the east, wood from the north, spices from wherever spices pretend to be important when men are dying. You leave without breakfast. Just water thick with a pinch of ground mint from a jar so old the label's worn to paper dust. Thomas is already at the desk, measuring out dried yarrow and something that might once have been sage. He doesn't ask where you're going. He only says, "Wear the thick beak. The air's heavy today." He's right. The harbor reeks before you're even halfway there. Not of death, not yet, but of tension. Of warm tar and wet rope, and that sour human smell that happens when men are trying to act normal, but failing. You pass a group of stevedores whispering. One points at you, not out of curiosity, out of hope. They think maybe you can stop what's coming. You nod, because pretending is part of the job. The warehouse is barely standing. Two of its walls lean in like they've given up. Inside, the air is hot and close. A makeshift curtain separates the front from the holding area. A man meets you there, mid-40s, lean, with that frantic energy of someone who's trying to stay ahead of the worst-case scenario. He calls himself Bartell. Doesn't offer a title, which you appreciate. He waves you through with a phrase you've heard too often this month. We didn't know where else to turn. Behind the curtain are 3 cots. One is empty, covered in a red cloth that wasn't red when the day started. Another holds a man barely conscious, mouth dry, eyes darting like trapped birds. The last bed holds a woman, young, barely 20. Her hands are tied with silken ribbon, not for restraint, but because someone, somewhere, still believes beauty might stop the plague. She's not breathing evenly. You count 5 seconds between each inhale, then 6, then 7. There's nothing to be done here. Not really. But you go through the motions. You light a bit of lavender under the mask's beak. You check the woman's eyes for clarity, her gums for darkening. You lift her wrist gently, feel the pulse, thrum then stutter. Bartle asks if she's contagious. You almost laugh. Instead, you say yes, assume so. Because if you tell him, maybe not, he'll let her walk through the docks. If you tell him definitely, he'll bury her alive. This is the balance now. Not medicine, politics. On your way out, Bartle hands you another letter. This one isn't sealed. It's folded, frayed at the edge. You read it later, back at the apothecary, while Thomas doozes in the corner. It's a request from a school. They've heard you speak Latin. They want you to teach the older boys about the nature of contagion. You put the letter down and stare at the wall. Children, in a city like this, what are they supposed to learn? You don't answer the letter. Not yet. Not today. Instead, you clean your gloves. You burn the corner of your robe where the sick girl coughed. You boil more linens. You tell Thomas that tomorrow he should rest, and then, finally, you allow yourself to sleep. But only after checking that the door is locked twice, and that the mask is hung just so, its beak pointing toward the window, like it's watching for something you haven't named yet. The next morning, it begins with stares. Not the wide-eyed ones you get from children who still think your mask makes you some kind of bird ghost. Not the reverent ones either from those who believe you're a priest of science, summoned to pull sickness from skin like thorns from a wound. No, today's stares are something new. Narrowed eyes, bent necks. That sideways glance people give when they're deciding whether to blame you for something they don't understand. And lately, there is so much they don't understand. You walk through the market at the edge of the square, not to shop, just to be seen. That's part of the job now, too. Visibility. Reassurance. But they've stopped seeing comfort in your presence. A woman spits near your feet. Not at you. Not exactly. But the message is clear. A young man mutters something behind your back. Something about dead neighbors and how they only started dying after you visited. You keep walking. The fruit sellers have started burning rosemary by their stalls. Not for the scent, but for the belief it keeps sickness away. That and cloves. Anything sharp. anything strong enough to cut the air. But nothing can cut air thickened with fear. You pass the alley behind the cathedral. It smells of salt and something iron. You don't stop. Not here. Not now. At the far end of the street, two boys chase each other with masks made from paper and twine-long beaks like yours, but cartoonish. They shriek and laugh, pretending to poke each other with wooden spoons dipped in vinegar. You want to correct them. Want to tell them the vinegar won't help. That the masks weren't made to protect them, only to make others feel safer. But the words don't come, because what would be the point? Instead, you return to the apothecary. Thomas is awake, though he shouldn't be. His face is pale, and his hands tremble as he grinds dried fennel into powder. He insists he's fine, just tired. But you notice how long he sits after standing, how long he takes to catch his breath. He says he'll make the rounds today. You don't argue. But before he leaves, you place a sprig of sage in his coat pocket, quietly, just in case. That night you dream of fire, not flames, not burning, but heat thick, slow, pressing down. You wake with sweat along your spine, even though the fire has long since died in the hearth. The window is open just enough to let in the damp night air, and still the room feels too full, too heavy. You don't go back to sleep. Instead, you sit by the desk, reorganizing tinctures and vials in silence. Some of the labels are fading. Some you can't even read anymore. You consider making new ones, but your hands feel slow, clumsy, so you don't. Later, you hear a knock, not on the front door, on the side panel near the alley. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. It's not a pattern you recognize. You answer with a lantern in one hand and a blade tucked into your sleeve. But no one's there. Only a small cloth pouch, inside a broken mask, the same kind the boys wore in the square. The twine is frayed, the paper damp and torn. There's no note, just the sound of someone walking away. Boots too quiet for confidence, too fast for calm. You watch the darkness for a while. Eventually, you close the door. You hang the pouch on the hook by the fireplace, not out of ritual, not even out of fear, just curiosity, or maybe resignation. And then, finally, you lie down. But you don't dream of fire this time. You dream of wind, cold and sharp and endless, and of a world where masks are no longer needed. A world where no one forgets your name. But even in the dream, you know that's not this one. The days are beginning to lose shape. Not just in the way time drifts when you're exhausted, but in the way place unravels your room, your mask, your steps through the crooked alleyways of the quarter, all beginning to blur into one long stretch of waiting. You wake, you treat, you clean, you wait. Not for improvement, not for news, just for something to feel new again. And nothing does, not even the air. The scent of vinegar has faded from your robes. It used to sting the nose and make your eyes water, but now it clings like memory-diluted, tired, familiar. The lavender you once tucked into the beak of your mask is long dried and crumbles if you breathe too hard. You should replace it. You don't. Someone coughs just outside the door. You freeze, mid-motion, spoon halfway to your mouth. Another cough. Then silence. You wait. 1 minute. Then 2. The spoon goes back into the bowl. The food is cold anyway. Downstairs, the wooden beams creak as someone walks past. You know the pattern. That's not the baker. It's too heavy. Not the apothecary, he drags 1 foot. This one is unfamiliar. New to the street, perhaps. Or maybe someone from another quarter who wandered too far, lost in grief or confusion. It's easy to get lost here. The city itself seems to forget where its buildings are half the time. Streets shift, Doors close where none used to be. Or maybe that's just you. There's mold in the corners of the ceiling. You tried to scrub it last week, but it always returns darker, softer. It grows faster than the sickness now. Some days you wonder if the mold will outlive you all. Maybe that's why you don't light candles anymore. Less warmth, less fuel for things that thrive in the dark. On the table, your journal lies open, ink smeared from the last rain. The words are barely legible. Day 94. Symptoms worsening. Fever, lesions, bloodied cough. Treatment unsuccessful. You've written that phrase more times than you can count. You could write it in your sleep. Maybe you have. You keep hearing a knock in your dreams. Not sharp, like someone calling for help. Just soft, deliberate, measured. It comes again every night around the same time. But when you wake and check the door, there's no one. No footprints, no message. Just the sound of the wind wrapping itself around the corners of the street, like a whisper you can't quite decipher. You've stopped opening the door now. You just listen. A letter came yesterday, sealed in black wax, no name, no symbol. Inside was a page with 3 lines. You are the last in your quarter. Burn what remains. Do not return to the well. You haven't responded. Who would you respond to? You should leave. That's the thought that creeps in between sips of thin broth and attempts at sleep. You should leave the city. Walk until the soot and sickness are behind you. Find a hill. Breathe clean air. But where would you go? The sickness is everywhere. The rot doesn't belong to this quarter alone. You've seen the rats run from one block to the next, watch them disappear into walls and re-emerge elsewhere, as if the plague moves through them. Maybe it does. Maybe it always did. There's a strange quiet tonight. Not peace, just quiet. No bells, no weeping, no doors slamming or screams muffled by cloth. Just the sound of your own breath behind the mask and the occasional creak of wood that could be anything whined. Ghosts, the bones of the building adjusting under the weight of everything unsaid. You stand by the window and look out. A man walks by, arms full of firewood, though there are no fires anymore. 2 children chase a hoop that doesn't roll, just wobbles like a tired wheel. The sky above is flat and gray, no stars. You miss the stars. Tomorrow you'll need to see Helen again. She's getting worse. The frog she tied to her foot hasn't helped. She says it still breathes when she sleeps, that she can feel it pulsing against her skin like a second heart. You nod when she tells you. You always nod. It's easier than truth. You check the salves one more time. The rosemary is nearly gone. You consider stealing more from the garden at the convent, but last time they caught you. They didn't say anything, just watched as you took it and walked away. The bed is hard. You lie on it without removing your boots. You've done this so many times now it barely feels like sleep, more like waiting with your eyes closed. You try to remember your name, just to see if it still feels like yours. It doesn't. The house at the end of Crooked Lane used to belong to a midwife. You remember her well. Gray hair, always in a loose bun, voice like wet cloth. You treated her son once, a fever that wouldn't break. He lived, not because of you, because he was lucky. She always said the same thing when you passed her window. The ones who stay are the ones who forget what leaving costs. You didn't know what she meant. You think you do now. Tonight you go there. You need more gauze, and she kept a trunk of linens. The door's unlocked, but the hinges grown loud enough to wake the dead. Inside, the floor smells of earth and time. A candle stub burns low in the corner, as if someone's only just left, though everything is layered with dust thick enough to mute your steps. You move through it slowly, careful not to disturb more than necessary. It feels wrong to breathe here. In the back room, her trunk waits. You open it, not gently. There's no one left to scold you for it. Inside, folded cloth, sealed jars of oil, and tucked in a corner a child's slipper. You pause, hold it, realize you hadn't meant to. Your hands are too used to reaching without asking. There's a note under the slipper, just one word, stay. No explanation, no signature. You put it back, you take only the linen and leave the room as it was. You don't look back. The streets are darker than before. Not just the absence of light, but the color of silence itself, thick, charcoal black, like everything's been burned in advance. You wonder if the plague will outlive even memory. If someday someone will walk these streets and feel only an odd chill in the air. You hope they won't remember your name. You hope they don't need to. A rat scurries past, bold and slow. You don't flinch. It pauses to stare at you like it knows what you're thinking. Like it's always known. You move on. The linen under your arm is heavy. Or maybe you're just tired. The walls here lean inward. You'd never noticed that before. Like the buildings themselves are hunching from grief. By the time you return to your quarters, the candle has guttered out. The room is filled with the kind of dark that presses inward, like the absence of heartbeat. You set the linen down. You don't light another candle. You don't need to see anything else tonight. On the table, you open your journal. Write nothing. Just run the quill over the page until it frays. Then tear that page out and place it under your cup. For what? You don't know. Just to feel like something was done. You lie down, not to sleep, just to listen to the wooden beams creak, to the distant coughs of strangers you'll never meet, to the breath of the city if it still breathes. If you still do, the air feels like it's holding its breath. You match it, and the room settles into stillness so thick even time seems unwilling to pass. You wake to the sound of coughing, not your own this time, but from behind the wall. Thin wood can't keep secrets, and in this house no one tries to. You hear the child first wet, uneven, frantic, then the mother's voice low and tight with fear. You don't move yet. There's no urgency in plague work anymore. When everyone is afraid, no one hurries. Your breath sits low in your lungs as you stare up at the cracked beams overhead, watching the dust drift in the morning light. There's always dust. Ash, dirt, fragments of hair and cloth. Everything breaks down in a city like this. Even time. When you finally rise, your back cracks like old timber. The mask waits by the basin, its long beak resting like a tired bird. You splash water on your face, avoiding your reflection in the warped tin mirror. You know what you'd see. Red-rimmed eyes, pale skin drawn tight from too many weeks without proper rest. You've aged since this began. Everyone has. But you carry it differently, not with dignity, exactly. More like resignation. There's no breakfast, not anymore. The bread is gone, and the man who delivered eggs hasn't been seen in 4 days. You chew a strip of dried meat from the pouch near the door. It's salt, sharp, and earthy on your tongue. It does nothing for your hunger, but it gives your jaw something to do. Routine helps. Even pointless routine. You dress quickly, strapping your satchel, tying your gloves, pulling the heavy coat over your shoulders. The sleeves are stiff with dried tincture. The cuffs smell like rosemary and vinegar. Your tools are already packed: scissors, thread, charcoal, leeches. There's not much you can do with them, but people expect you to carry them. It helps them believe you know something they don't. Outside, the street is gray and still. No vendors. No children playing with wooden hoops. Just shuttered homes, a breeze that moves nothing, and a silence so thick it hums. The sky threatens rain but never delivers. It's been like that for weeks now, clouds gathering, like witnesses that refuse to testify. You move through the alleys like a shadow, your boots scuffing stone. On the walls, old signs mark the doors of the sick-painted symbols in ash or coal, warnings written in hands that trembled. You've seen them so often now, you don't even read them anymore. The first house you visit smells of lavender. A woman lies in the back room, wrapped in too many blankets, her lips chapped, her breath shallow. You listen to her chest, press your fingers to her wrist, but you already know. She opens her eyes once, meets yours. She doesn't flinch at the mask. No one does anymore. You leave a sprig of dried mint by her bedside, not because it helps, but because her daughter is watching from the corner, and you want her to believe you've done something. You nod once softly and close the door behind you. There are more houses, more eyes, more silence. By the time you return to your quarters, your legs ache and your gloves are damp. You strip in the yard, wash your hands with lye, and hang the coat to air. You sit beneath the overhang and watch the wind move through the weeds. You remember when this place was noisy, when bells rang, when bakers shouted, when morning smelled like bread and smoke. Now the city exhales nothing, just stale air and silence. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the sound of your own breathing. Still steady, still yours. For now. You don't know when the mask stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like a second skin. In the beginning, it was ritual tighten the straps, settle the beak, load the herbs. Now it's muscle memory, a motion made without thought, like scratching an itch. You carry yourself differently when you wear it, shoulders straighter, steps heavier. It's not just the added weight, but the expectation that comes with it. You've become a figure people don't talk to, only talk it. Their words fall into the eye holes and vanish, and you're left with stories you didn't ask for and pain you can't fix. Today you carry 6 letters, requests, really, slipped under your door during the night, pressed into your hands by gloved fingers, or left on your bench like offerings to a silent god. Each is folded carefully, most marked with symbols, not names. No one signs anything anymore. You recognize some handwriting. There's a baker's wife whose son you tried to treat last week. There's a house near the chapel where the coughing started 2 days ago. Each letter is a task, a plea, a moment where someone still believes in intervention. You take them because you must, not because you know how to help. The third house is different. A man greets you with the kind of tiredness that settles into the bones. He doesn't speak, only nods and steps aside. Inside there are 2 children, one already still, the other trying not to cry. The mother is gone. The air smells faintly of garlic and damp linen. You check the surviving child's pulse, more out of habit than necessity. You give the man a packet of dried thyme and tell him to burn it slowly. He doesn't ask if it will work. He just says thank you, and that hurts more than anything. You leave a note in your ledger, your handwriting smaller than usual. Every entry takes a part of you now. It used to be just a record. Now it's a confession. The mask hides the wear on your face, but not the way you hesitate at each threshold. You tell yourself it's because you're thorough. You know it's because you're scared, not of the illness that fear left weeks ago, but of helplessness, of becoming too used to this, of walking into homes filled with grief and feeling nothing. You return to the quarters late, throat dry and boots caked in dust. The air inside smells of damp wool and vinegar. You light a small candle and stare at the flame like it holds an answer. You haven't written a letter home in weeks. What would you say? That you're fine? That the city isn't crumbling, just rearranging itself around its dead? You once believed in medicine. Now you believe in time and in endings. You remove the mask slowly. It leaves a line on your skin that fades, but never fast enough. You rub your temples, pour a half cup of boiled water, and stare at the ledger you've been avoiding. There are names in it now, not official ones, just small descriptions. The girl with the silver comb, the man who wouldn't let go of her hand, the boy who didn't cry. They're not medical records anymore. They're memory anchors, proof that you saw them, that they happened, that they were real. As night falls, you sit by the open window. The streets outside are silent, but not still. Life continues in quieter rhythms, in the way a father carries water, in the way a sister braids her hair out of habit, in the way someone lights a lamp even though they're alone. You watch for a while, then turn away and write one more entry before sleep. Not for them, for you. And somewhere in the distance a bell rings once, just once, enough to remind you that morning will come, whether or not anyone survives to see it. The knock comes just after dusk. You're standing over a small fire, stirring a pot that hardly deserves the name. What's inside is more ritual than meal-thin gruel, stretched with rainwater flavored faintly by the memory of leaks. The knocking is soft, not frantic, not fearful, just deliberate. 3 even taps that feel premeditated, like punctuation. You freeze with a wooden spoon halfway to your lips. For a long moment, you don't move. You've lived long enough to know there's meaning in sound. Some knocks are desperate, some angry, but this one, it feels like a reminder. You wait. No second knock follows. No voice. Just silence, swelling around the room like rising fog. You cross the threshold of your quarters, each step weighed down by a dozen thoughts that never finish forming. The door is thick oak, older than you, older than most of the city. You pull it open slowly. The hinges groan, reminding the world of their age. But there's no one there. Just the corridor, dimly lit by torchlight, empty and still. And on the stone step, a small bundle wrapped in pale linen, tied with red thread. You bring it inside carefully, as if it might bleed or break. Inside is a single smooth stone, warm to the touch despite the evening chill. A folded piece of parchment. A sprig of dried lavender. You unfold the paper. It contains no words, just a single drawing, a bird long-beaked, wings outstretched, one eye darkened. The style is crude, almost childlike, but something in its angles makes your stomach turn. You flip the paper. Nothing on the back. You hold it to the firelight, check for ink, for watermarks. Nothing, just the bird, just the eye. You go to the window. The alley beyond is deserted. Only shadows move, shifting softly in the breeze. You listen not for footsteps, but for intention. There's none you can find. Still, the air feels occupied. You sit down at your table. The bundle rests beside your bowl of untouched porridge. The smell of smoke drifts in from somewhere, probably the burned district, where the sick are sent to expire out of sight. You've been there. You know the smell. But this smoke is different, fainter, earthier, like old incense. You close your eyes. It reminds you of something, a place, a person, a ceremony you attended long ago, one meant to protect rather than cure. You open your eyes. The paper hasn't moved. But now the bird seems closer, not literally, just nearer to you. The way some paintings seem to follow you with their eyes. You fold the parchment, but the act feels strangely intimate, as if you're tucking away a secret that isn't yours. You slip it into your journal between 2 pages you haven't written on yet. Somehow it feels right there. You don't eat. Hunger left you days ago. You sip water instead, listening for more knocks, for more signs. Nothing comes, but something has already arrived. Later, as the candle burns low, you find yourself humming. Not a tune, you know, not one you've ever sung, but your mouth forms it anyway. It's low, slow, a melody that drags like wet cloth. You stop suddenly, realizing you don't know when you started. You check the windows again. Still empty outside. But the silence feels active now, like something holding its breath. You sleep in the chair by the fire that night. Not because you meant to, but because the bed feels wrong, too open, too soft. The fire dims until the room is wrapped in gray. You wake once, sometime deep into the night, unsure if a noise stirred you. The bundle is still there on the table. You get up and place it inside a drawer, not out of fear, just respect. You stand by the window, not watching, just being watched. The street is unchanged, and yet you feel that something has entered. Not your quarters, not your building. Something has entered the night itself. You return to the chair, wrap yourself in a blanket, and whisper something to the fire that you don't understand. A prayer, maybe, a greeting. You don't wait for a reply. The silence is enough. In the morning, when you rise, you'll wonder whether any of it happened, whether the knock was real, whether the paper is still in your ledger, whether the bird had a message. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, the knock was the story, and you were the one who opened the door. The morning is gray, not just the sky, but everything beneath it. The buildings, the streets, the faces of those you pass, they all wear the same dull hue, as if the color of life has been suspended. You rise slowly, body stiff, thoughts sluggish, but the feeling is there, not fear, not memory, just a strange weight behind your ribs, like something pressing gently from the inside. You don't check the drawer where the bundle rests, not yet. You're not ready to see if it was real. And besides, some knowledge is better carried in uncertainty. Certainty makes things permanent. Memory gives them movement. You make your way to the infirmary. The corridors are unusually empty. You pass the quarters of others, some doors ajar, most shut tight. You wonder how many of them felt it, too, heard the knock, smelled the smoke, saw the bird. But you don't ask. This isn't something you speak aloud. It's the kind of thing that dilutes when shared, like a dream that unravels the moment you put it into words. In the infirmary, a child is coughing a wet, slow sound that sticks to the walls like steam. The herbalist is already at her post, grinding something bitter in a mortar. She doesn't look up. But she speaks. "Did you hear it?" she asks, softly, as if it were a common greeting. You hesitate, then nod. She doesn't smile, doesn't flinch. She just sets the pestle down and turns to you. Her eyes are tired, older than her face. "I found ash by my door," she says, "in the shape of a bird, just a shadow, gone with the breeze. But I saw it, I know I did." You don't know what to say, so you don't say anything. She nods like she expected that, too, then goes back to her work. Later that day, you visit the outer wards. These are the places where the sickest are kept, those who don't speak anymore, who don't move except in fevered fits. You come not as a healer today, but as an observer. That's what you tell yourself. But in truth, you're looking. For what, you're not sure. Confirmation? A sign? You pass a row of cots, each occupied by someone caught between this world and the next. One man mutters constantly under his breath something about feathers. Another woman, eyes wide but unseeing, keeps her hands folded in the shape of wings. At the far end of the ward, behind a screen of gauze, you find a boy no older than 10. His skin is pale, but not sickly, just still. His breath is shallow, but even. And in his lap rests a small bundle linen, wrapped, tied with red thread. Identical to the one you found. You don't touch it. You don't move. You simply stand and watch him. His eyes remain closed. But he speaks. It's not a warning, he says. It's a key. You step closer, heart pounding. A key to what? You ask. He doesn't answer. Just turns his head slightly and begins to hum. The same tune you hummed by the fire. The tune you didn't know you knew. You step back slowly. Something in the air feels thinner now, like you've walked too high into the mountains and forgot to bring breath with you. You leave the ward. Outside, the light is sharper. The air smells of burning rosemary and dust. You feel the eyes of the city again, not human ones, older, watching through cracks in the brick and the spaces between torchlight. That night, you return to your quarters and finally open the drawer. The bundle is still there. You unwrap the stone. Still warm. The lavender is brittle but fragrant. The paper is unchanged, except now the bird has two eyes, both dark, both watching. You burn the parchment in the hearth, not out of fear, out of respect. You stand for a long time watching the flame consume it. It doesn't curl or blacken the way normal paper does. It disappears slowly, almost gracefully, like it was never quite solid. You lie back in your bed. The walls seem closer now. Not threatening, just attentive. You feel held, witnessed, not judged. Before you sleep, you whisper something. Not a prayer, not a plea. Just a name. You don't know whose, but it feels right. And somewhere outside, past stone and soot, an echo answers back. You wake to a different kind of silence. It's not the gentle hush of night or the stillness of a sleeping house. It's the silence that follows a scream, that wide, echoing absence left behind when something loud and final has been removed. You sit up slowly, unsure whether you dreamed something or forgot something important. The bed creaks beneath you, wood swollen from damp, stuffed straw, shifting under the weight of a night you didn't entirely survive. Outside, the sky hangs heavy with gray. Not the storm gray of summer, but the flat gray of exhaustion, as though the heavens themselves are tired of watching. You wash your face with water that tastes faintly of smoke and metal. There's no soap left, just a thin sliver of fat, slicked cloth you rub between your hands out of habit more than hope. Your hands tremble when you dry them, not from illness, you think, just from the constant press of tension behind your ribs, like your bones are holding in a breath you forgot to exhale. There's a rat on the floor, not moving, not freshly dead either, just there, its small body curled in on itself like it chose this room to fold away in. The healer said rats were good omens once. They knew where the warmth was, where the food was, where it was still safe. If that's true, then this one died lying. The hall outside your room smells of wax and vinegar. The floors haven't been scrubbed yet. There's dried something near the doorframe, but you don't look too closely. You pass other rooms on the way to the stairwell, some open, some closed. Some have shoes still outside, placed neatly, as though the wearers might return. Most won't. You head to the back kitchen, where the fire has been burning low since before dawn. There's a pot of boiled oats on the coals, left too long. The top has formed a skin. You scrape it away and take only a few bites. Hunger lives in you like a guest who overstayed, but today your stomach won't speak to it. The physician enters not long after. His boots are muddied, his gloves black with ash. He drops something wrapped in cloth onto the table, without ceremony. When he unwraps it, it's not a vial or an instrument, but a handful of broken charms, iron tokens, bits of etched bone, and a shriveled frog tied in red thread. They were under the mattress, he says flatly. Our patient in 2F thought they'd help. You don't ask if the charms worked. You both know the answer. He pushes the frog aside with the back of a spoon. Superstition is the only medicine most people still believe in. It makes sense. In a way, the plague is invisible. The priests say it's punishment. The scholars say it's imbalance. The apothecaries say it's bad air. No one agrees. But a frog tied to the ankle? That's easy. That's something you can hold. He asks you to burn them, like always. Don't bury them, he warns. They remember too much. You nod, take the bundle, and step out into the gray again. The courtyard has a fire pit, half dug, rimmed with scorched stone. You toss the charms in, one by one. The bones crack, the iron smokes. The frog barely twitches as it chars. And all the while, you wonder if you were the one dying in that bed. What would you hide under your mattress? The smoke carries no scent, and no answers. Later, you're called to the third floor, room 3C. It's the smallest in the house. Low ceiling, single window, the glass warped like it's forgotten how to be clear. There's a bed, a stool, and a bucket. No personal effects. Just a frayed cloth hanging by the door with faded stitching that might have once been a name. The floor creaks in 3 specific places, but you avoid them without thinking. Inside, a young woman sits on the bed, upright, unmoving. You almost miss the rise and fall of her chest. Her hands are clasped in her lap, holding something you can't see. She doesn't look up when you enter, just keeps staring forward as though you're the least real thing in the room. She's new. You check the chart on the hook by the door. No name. Age maybe 20s? Someone's note, hastily written. Condition, unknown. Arrived unconscious, woke up silently that morning. No complaints, no requests. No sound. You say hello. She doesn't respond. You ask if she's in pain. Still nothing. You step closer, keeping your voice low and slow, as though trying not to frighten a deer in a clearing. But she's not frightened. She's just not there. Not in the way people are usually present. Her body is parked in the room, but her mind is in another century. Only when you kneel beside her do you see what she's holding. A frog, dried, wrapped in yellowed linen and bound with old twine. Not like the talismans from earlier, this one's older, carefully preserved. You recognize the ink markings on its back, folk symbols, defensive ones. She clutches it like it's the last known language she remembers. You ask where she got it. No reply. You ask if someone gave it to her. Her eyes flick just once toward the floor. You check her pulse, strong, skin warm, breathing steady. Not the plague, not yet. Just a vacancy so complete it feels architectural. Like someone hollowed her out and left only the quiet behind. You tell her you'll be back later. She doesn't react. As you exit, the physician is waiting near the stairs. You tell him she's stable but withdrawn. He grunts the way men do when they're pretending not to be uneasy. That's the third one this week who won't speak, he mutters. It's not just the fever taking people. It's the silence, too. You say nothing, because what is there to say? The silence is a plague of its own, and it spreads without breath, without contact, without warning. One day someone's telling you a joke by the fire, and the next they're staring through you like your skin is made of fog. Downstairs, someone screams. Then nothing. You don't run. You never do anymore. Panic is expensive, and no one can afford it. You walk instead, steady and slow. Down the crooked staircase, past the walls etched with scratches from stretchers, down the corridor that always smells like damp stone and iron. Room 1, if screaming came from there. Inside, a boy maybe 13 is gripping the edge of his mattress. Eyes wild, chest heaving. The healer's already there, trying to calm him. You kneel opposite her, place your hand on his arm. His skin is burning. He looks at you like you're a ghost. And then he says there were frogs in the walls, hundreds. You tell him there's nothing there, just dreams. He shakes his head so hard his teeth chatter. They were whispering. In Latin or something older. You don't correct him, you just hold his gaze and nod. You say sometimes the fever shows us things, but deep down you wonder, because sometimes it doesn't. The physician's journal sits open on the table in the front room. You weren't meant to read it, but no one's around and it's not locked. Not that locking things seems to matter much anymore. Keys don't stop death, neither do secrets. It's written in Latin, of course, most of it. His hand is tight, cramped, the kind of script you write when you're trying to wrestle control from chaos. He's been tracking everything. The time between symptoms, the size of the swellings, the color of vomit, the sounds people make in their final hours. And on the last page, yesterday's entry 1 line in the margins catches your eye. Loosely translated, I no longer know if I am observing decay or becoming part of it. You shut the journal and place it back where it was. Guilt warms your throat for a moment, then fades. Outside it's raining again. Softly, but enough to bring the rot back into the air. The garden behind the house has gone wild. Medicinal herbs tangled with weeds, soil turned to mud. You used to tend it. Now no one has the time. Or maybe no one remembers why it mattered. You step outside anyway. The rain feels cleaner than the air inside. You inhale and let it soak through your sleeves. No frogs today, no whispering. Just the wet sound of a city too tired to scream. You head back in to restock the bandage drawers, gauze, linen, cloth torn from old tunics. Some still stained from previous patients. There's no waste anymore. You boil what you can. What you can't, you pray over. And then you reuse. There's a knocking at the door. Not loud, just steady. You open it to find a man standing in the gray light. Middle-aged, rough hands. Pale eyes. His hat is soaked, and he's holding a bundle wrapped in a blanket. Without asking, he says, "She's sick." "They all are. I don't have coin, but I brought what I had." He extends the blanket. Inside is a silver brooch, dull from wear, and 2 small jars of honey. Expensive. Probably all they had left. You nod and gesture him in. Moments like this come more often now. Trade, bartering, begging. Everyone has a price, but no one knows what anything's worth anymore. How much is one fevered night worth? How many jars of honey buy back a child's breath? You walk him to the rear room, where the healer waits. He places the bundle on the floor and crouches beside it. You glance once inside. 2 children, quiet. One is awake, eyes wide and cloudy. The other may be asleep. Maybe not. He whispers to them in a language you don't know, kisses their foreheads, then stands up straight and leaves without another word. You don't call after him. Everyone deserves their own way of walking away. Inside, the silence thickens again. You whisper prayers you don't believe, clean wounds you can't see, administer salves that probably don't help. But it isn't about curing anymore. It's about standing between the fire and what hasn't burned yet. By nightfall, there are more visitors. A girl carrying her sister. A widow with shaking hands and a letter she won't read aloud. An old man who refuses to take off his boots, because if I do, I'll die. You help them all. Not because it will fix anything, but because not helping is worse. And in the moments between the breath you hold when someone coughs, the pause before you pull back a blanket, you wonder how much more this house can take before it becomes just another tomb with a roof. The house creaks with familiarity now, its floorboards groaning not from disrepair, but from recognition, like it knows your weight, your steps, your rhythms. It no longer feels like a place you entered. It feels like something that grew around you, absorbed you, began reshaping its silence to match the contours of your exhaustion. The walls smell of boiling herbs, burnt fat, wax, and sweat. The smell never leaves, only thins or thickens depending on the hour, depending on how many people coughed in the night or bled into the linens. You talk to yourself less now and more to the building, as if it might answer. Not aloud, necessarily, but in the way your eyes pause at a beam that cracked since yesterday, or the way the back door takes longer to close, like it's holding out for one more person to walk through. You note these things with the same care you used to reserve for symptoms. Everything feels like a symptom, even the wind. There's a boy curled in a cot beneath the small window. His fever has returned, despite the compress, despite the tincture. You've tried everything the manual suggests: sage boiled 3 times, poppy milk in measured drops, pressure points behind the ear and under the jaw. Still, he drifts in and out of hallucination. He talks of frogs with human hands, of dogs that whisper beneath the floorboards, of plague clouds shaped like angels. His mother hasn't left his side in 2 days. Her hair has gone from braided to brittle, her voice reduced to the same 3 words: please, not him. You don't promise anything anymore. You just nod. The nod is universal, shapeless. It means, I hear you. It means, I'll try. It means, I've stopped hoping too, but I haven't stopped moving. The physician passed through briefly at dusk, carrying a sack that clinked with glass. He gave you more dried feverfew, a fresh mask soaked in vinegar, and a note scribbled in a language that almost doesn't exist anymore, half Latin, half superstition. You placed it under the child's mattress anyway. At this point, you honor every belief equally. Logic died weeks ago, smothered under the weight of too many bodies, too many nights where nothing worked. You haven't slept properly in 3 nights. You close your eyes sometimes, but it's never rest. Just blinks stretched too far. You see the inside of your eyelids and think of what you haven't done. Linens that need washing, patients who might still be waiting, herbs you forgot to boil. There's always something. Rest has become the indulgence of people without responsibility. You envy them, these ghosts with no names. Outside, the city groans. Not literally, but in the shifting of wheels and wood, in the half-hearted calls of market sellers pretending life is still going on. You wonder how they pretend. You can't anymore. You hear coughing from 3 houses down and know the rhythm by heart. First the dry bark, then the wet gasp, then the silence. You know what comes next. You've heard the pattern over a dozen times this week. Inside, the candlelight draws shadows across the room like brush strokes. It's dim, but not dark. The flame flickers whenever the door is opened, which is less frequent now. Fewer people seek help. You don't know if it's because they're getting better or because there are fewer left to seek. A woman on the far pallet mutters in her sleep. Her eyes move beneath the lids, fast and desperate. Her hands twitch as if holding something invisible. A child, maybe, or a memory. You tuck the blanket higher under her chin, not because she's cold, she's burning, but because the gesture makes you feel human again, if only for a second. The rain starts again, a thin tapping against the shutters, soft and patient. The kind of rain that doesn't demand attention, just presence. You let it fill the silence. Let it remind you that the world outside this house still exists, that something somewhere is being cleaned. Then there's a sound from the hallway, bare feet, hesitant, a pause, then a knock, not on the front door, but on the wall, a child's knock. You rise slowly, spine stiff, knees aching, and move to meet whoever summoned you. It's a girl, 6, maybe 7, thin, eyes too large for her face. She doesn't speak, just hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. You recognize the pattern. It belonged to one of your former patients. You know what's inside before you even unfold it. A coin, a sprig of lavender, and a single silver button. Payment, or tribute, or hope. You take it without a word. She nods and disappears down the hall. You place the bundle on the shelf beside the others. There's no system, just a shelf of things that meant something to someone, a small museum of gestures. The house doesn't care about value. It only remembers the offering. You return to the boy's side. His fever's broken, just slightly. He's breathing deeper now, less erratic. You allow yourself a breath. Just one. You don't smile. That would feel like tempting fate. You sit by him and write nothing in your journal. The candle wax pools at your elbow. You close your eyes just for a moment and listen to the house breathe with you. It remembers. It holds and it endures. There are nights when your mask begins to feel less like protection and more like a second skull, rigid, unfeeling, a shape you can't escape. Tonight is one of those nights. The leather sticks faintly to the bridge of your nose where the sweat has dried and sealed the beak against your skin. The herbs stuffed inside, lavender, myrrh, wormwood, no longer smell sharp. Now they're just familiar. You breathe them in, not for safety, but for ritual. You've forgotten what clean air feels like. The scent of rot lives in the walls, in your sleeves, in your own mouth, when you speak too close to the mask. Outside, the rain has stopped, but left behind puddles that reflect the flickering lanterns. You move through the street like a ghost. No one watches. Most windows are shuttered, doors bolted. The few souls that remain outside give you space. They always do. The robe, the staff, the silhouette. They don't see a man beneath it. They see a walking omen. The last face many will see. Tonight's rounds take you to the poor edge of town, where the gutters clog faster and the homes sink slightly into the soil. The buildings lean in close to each other, like they're conspiring, trying to brace themselves against what's coming. You step over broken pavers and pass a dead cat in the alley. Not stiff, not bloated. Fresh. Someone will find it tomorrow and whisper that it's a sign. Everything is a sign now. The wind direction. The shape of the clouds. A bruise that wasn't there the night before. Your first patient is a widow. She doesn't speak anymore. She just lies beneath a sheet, breathing slow, her eyes fixed on a crack in the ceiling. You visited her 4 nights in a row. Each time, you clean the wound on her side. It isn't plague, just an infection. But that doesn't matter to the neighbors. Al is ill, and they've long since stopped visiting. You apply the salve gently. Her skin is thin, papery. You remember when she used to smile. Now she barely blinks. You don't say anything. There's nothing new to say. You could lie and tell her she's getting better. You could offer a prayer. Instead, you focus on the work, the motion of your hands, the method, the stillness. When you leave, you mark her door with a smear of charcoal, not to warn others, but to remind yourself, this one is still fighting. Next, a boy of 13, alone. His parents died last week. He sleeps with his head on the table, clutching a spoon. He refuses to leave the house. You knock once, wait, then let yourself in. He doesn't speak, but he lets you refill his water. He watches as you check his temperature, listens as you list the things he must keep doing. Eat, drink, sleep, breathe. His eyes follow you like he's memorizing something, like he expects to have to become you when you leave. You place a jar of broth beside him and leave your mask on the table for a moment, just long enough for him to see your face. It's the only time you've done that this week. It feels like removing your armor, but he nods. And in the silence it feels like enough. The streets are darker when you return. The fog has rolled in from the river, thick, yellowish, full of damp smells. Your robe clings to your legs. You walk slower now. Your back aches. The staff grows heavier with each step, not because it weighs more, but because you do. 2 more visits. One to a cellar where a woman lies on straw with 2 children beside her, all of them sleeping, breathing shallow, the air too still. You leave food. No one stirs. Then to a church where the priest has started keeping bodies in the back. You help him move one. It's a task neither of you talk about. The man is young, maybe 20. His hands are folded. Someone made sure of that. You carry him together, feet first, trying not to bump the doorframe. It's muscle memory now, the angle, the timing, the silence. When you step outside again, the sky has begun to brighten in the east. Not morning yet, but the hour where time feels hollow. The birds haven't begun. The city is holding its breath. You pause near the bridge, where you sometimes stop to check your notes. Tonight you simply stand still. Your mask is soaked inside. Your hands tremble slightly. Your knees click. But none of that matters. What matters is that you are still moving, still marking doors, still carrying what others won't. You look down into the water and see your reflection. Beaked, dark, faceless. The city doesn't know your name. Most never ask, but the bridge remembers your footsteps. The stones remember your weight. And in that you find something close to peace. You breathe deep, then turn back toward the next house, already reciting the names from memory. The mask fits again. The rhythm returns, and the work continues. The night isn't over. It never really is. There's no curtain fall, no clear end. Only a thinning of the dark, a softening at the edges. The lamp oil burns low, but your hands keep moving. You've wrapped the same type of bandage 15 times tonight. You've whispered the same instructions to a dozen people. Some heard, some didn't. One nodded without understanding a word. But it doesn't matter. They needed someone to say something. Your boots are caked in dried filth. You scrape them against the step before entering the next home, more out of habit than hope. Inside, a man sits in a chair near the hearth, eyes closed, body slack. His daughter speaks softly to him. She tells him a story from when she was young, something about chasing geese in the market square. Her voice shakes, but she keeps going, even when he stops breathing. You do not interrupt. She finishes the story, stands, nods, and walks outside. You follow her out after a moment and mark the door. She doesn't ask what it means. She already knows. At the corner near the well, a woman calls you over. Her husband has locked himself in the upstairs room. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. Says he won't until the angels speak to him. You climb the stairs slowly, your knees stiff and loud. He's curled in the corner, a blanket over his head, muttering to himself. You sit across the room. No questions, no threats, just time. After 10 minutes, he stops talking. After 20, he peeks out. When you hand him water, he drinks it without a word. Sometimes the mask works better when you don't speak. It gives people space to collapse without being watched, to break without witness. You return to the street and find a boy waiting. His hand is bandaged wrong, too tight, turning blue. You kneel and redo it. He doesn't say thank you, just runs off. You watch him go, and the pain in your spine makes you swear softly behind the mask. But the wrap was better the second time. That's something. Your satchel is lighter now. Fewer herbs, less cloth. No more bread. But your notes are full. Each name, each door, each hour logged in the scratch of ink that's starting to blur from damp fingers. Back in your quarters, you remove the mask and wipe your face with a damp cloth. There's no comfort in it, just routine. You change into another robe, hang the other to dry. You sharpen your shears even though you may not use them again tonight. The ritual is its own medicine. You think about the names you learned today, the ones you'll forget by morning. You think about the man in the church cellar, about the boy with the spoon, about the widow who hasn't blinked in 3 days. You remember how her fingers twitched slightly when you placed the cloth over her stomach. In the corner, a small bell rings. Someone at the door. You don't sigh. You don't speak. You just stand, fasten the robe, lift the mask, and slide it back into place. The straps tug gently behind your ears, settling like hands you've grown used to. You open the door and step into the cold. It smells like vinegar and ash. Somewhere, a rooster crows, too early, too confused. You walk toward the next house, boots scuffing softly. In your bag, 1 vial of tincture, 3 wraps, and a single candle. The sun will rise soon, but the city never really wakes. And you're not sure you sleep anymore. The streets are still. It's not that the plague has ended, it hasn't, but there's a difference in the quiet now. A kind of aftermath that settles before the final toll. The bodies have slowed. The sick now lie still, not because they're healing, but because they've moved past the point of fighting. There's less coughing in the alleys, less shouting for help. The urgency is gone, and in its place, stillness. You walk slower now, not from fatigue, though it rides your shoulders like a yoke, but because there's nothing to chase. No footsteps echoing from behind you, no bells clanging from doors. Only the faintest sounds, a dog scratching at wood, a cart creaking as someone pushes it empty through the square. You feel the mask shift slightly as you turn your head. It's become a part of you, this beak. You forget how your own face feels. You haven't seen it in weeks. You don't even think of it when you wash. You wipe the edges of the mask, clean the beak, refill the sachets of herbs inside, rosemary, lavender, and wormwood, and that's the routine. It's not disguise anymore. It's identity. You pass a home you visited 10 days ago. The shutters are gone now. No lights. You remember the woman who lived there. She asked you if it would hurt. You told her no. She believed you. You weren't sure at the time, but it felt like the right answer. You don't stop walking. A man crosses your path ahead. Not sick. Just drunk. He mutters at you, points to the sky, says something about the moon being too bright for this kind of night. You nod politely, though he can't see it. He tips his hat anyway. You keep walking. There's a wind tonight. It sweeps down the narrow lanes and carries with it the smell of burnt herbs and sweat and damp wood. You tug your cloak tighter, though the cold doesn't bother you anymore. What unsettles you now is the absence of sound, of people, of interruption. It's too easy to imagine the city staying like this forever. Like it's been sealed in wax, each street a preserved relic waiting for someone to remember what it used to be. A door creaks ahead. A child steps out, barefoot, hair tangled. She stares at you, doesn't run, doesn't speak, just watches. You lift a hand in greeting. She blinks once, then retreats inside, pulling the door closed behind her, without a word. You sit on the steps of a broken fountain. The water is stagnant now, the moss thick around the base. You remember when this square was full, merchants shouting, music from the inn, laughter bubbling from windows. You close your eyes and try to hear it, but the silence swallows everything. You reach into your satchel and pull out your notebook. You flip through the pages. So many names, so many homes. A record of vanishing. You don't cry. You haven't cried in weeks. It's not because you don't care. It's because there's no room left for it. Grief has been replaced by memory. and memory is quieter. You light a small candle and place it on the edge of the fountain. Just one, just for tonight, a flicker against the dark. You sit there a long while, the flame dancing near your fingers. You don't speak, you don't move, you just listen. Because something in you knows this city is listening back. The candle has nearly melted down to nothing. Its stubby flame flickers against the cool stone walls, casting long shadows across the uneven bricks that have watched you grow older in silence. You haven't moved from your place at the edge of the square. The fountain behind you has long since gone still, the water within stagnant and dark, but even its silence feels companionable now. Around you, the city has gone quiet, not in the terrified hush of fear, but in the gentle surrender of exhaustion. Pompeii is no longer holding its breath. It is simply tired. You press your back against the stone. Every vertebra registers the chill, the pressure. Your muscles ache with the memory of movement, of tasks that once filled every hour of your waking days. There was always another patient, another knock at the door, another body to bless or bury. You've forgotten how to be still without guilt, but tonight you let yourself try. You take off your mask, not carefully, not ceremonially, just slowly, as if the mask has grown roots into your skin. The leather is damp with breath and years, and the moment it leaves your face, the night air rushes in like an old friend returned from war. The smells are different now, not the sharp antiseptic of herbs or the rot of illness. Just air, earth, a trace of lavender maybe or memory. You draw it in deeply. For the first time in months you breathe without the filtered veil. It startles your lungs. You let it. No one is watching. There are no patients, no duties, only you and this quiet, collapsing city. Your hands lie open in your lap. You study the small burns, the fading ink stains, the ring of bruises around your wrists where the buckles of your cloak dug too tightly. These hands once held lives. Now they simply rest. You remember the girl with the fever who made you promise she'd feel the sun again. The merchant who clutched his ledger even as the light left his eyes. The midwife who whispered prayers over her own pulse. You remember every face, every cough, every goodbye. You've never written them down, not because you forgot, but because the act of remembering felt more sacred without paper. It breathes, stirs, low and unbothered, carrying the ash of distant fires and something older dust from roads walked by sandals long crumbled. The flame beside you bends, but doesn't go out. You respect its stubbornness. Not everything wants to disappear. Your limbs grow heavy, not with sleep, with stillness, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to hold. Your body has done enough. Your thoughts slow, not from fatigue, but from fullness. You are not empty. You are saturated with lives, with names, with effort. You lean your head back. Let it rest against the stone. It doesn't matter if it's cold. You are past discomfort now. There is no need to recoil from it. Pain is not punishment. It is presence. You look upward, past the roofs, past the skeletal remains of chimneys, past the cracked lintels and smoke-washed walls. The stars tonight are faint, struggling past the haze, but they are there. You don't need to count them. Just knowing they exist is enough. You once told a dying man that the stars were ancestors watching over us. He said he hoped they turned away sometimes to grant us privacy. You laughed. He didn't. You close your eyes, not in surrender, but in trust, the kind that takes years to build. You let your body fall inward, like a wave rolling into itself. Your memories loosen their grip, one by one, not erased, just offered up, not forgotten, just returned to the city that made you, that held you, that will, in its own way, remember you, not with monuments, but with quiet, A voice in the dark, the one you carry, the one that's always whispered from beneath the mask, tells you that this isn't the end. It's the moment after the end, when even silence is done speaking, and all that remains is stillness. And in that stillness you finally sleep. You made it. Through the dust, through the fear, through the quiet unraveling of a world that once felt unshakable. But now, it's time to let go. There's no need to carry the mask anymore. No names to memorize, no bodies to comfort, no city to save. Only breath, only stillness, only the rhythm of sleep curling around your thoughts, soft as ash on stone. Let the story fade now. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the silence take its shape around you. You've earned the rest. And tonight, the world, what's left of it, rests with you. If this story helped you drift even just a little, you can always come back. And if you're still listening, you're not alone. Good night, and sleep deeply.